Greetings, adventurers. My name is Kramer. So the time has come once again, apparently, for new Lord of the Rings media, films this time, which means that it is also time, once again for me, as a content creator to provide my opinions on this. And it's actually going to be a little bit different than what you might be used to if you have seen my videos on the Rings of Power. I'll state right off the bat that I'm not attempting to pick any fights or offend anybody, so my intentions are very clear. They have and always will be what I believe is best for the fandom of the books that I love so much, and what is in our best interest. So bearing that in mind, if anyone chooses to take umbrage with what I have to say, that's on them and it's not my intention. So Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema are creating new Lord of the Rings films, potentially. And there's not a whole lot of information about that. And this has been anticipated. We expected this. New games have been in development for the last couple of years, at least at this point. But at the moment, given this announcement, I actually don't think that we have enough information to go on that really tells us what this means for the fandom moving forward, what we can expect from these films, because really, aside from the fact that they're being made, nothing has been announced. There's not writing on the wall or anything really as of yet. We've just been told that there are plans in place to build a wall eventually. We don't know who's writing on it. But I do think that there is a very important lesson here. And a lesson that is backed up in the books themselves by what Professor Tolkien himself wrote in The Lord of the Rings that should inform how it is that we process this information and proceed moving forward. And I'm actually going to make the case that we, as a fandom collectively, should be cautiously optimistic. I know, I'm very well aware of what the counter arguments to this position are. It might take a couple people by surprise, given how much I disliked the idea of the Rings of Power happening, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But the real key here that I want to focus on, the theme for the video, as it were, is that fighting against what we know is evil is one thing, but having the courage to hope, that is a very real and a very different battle. So this is how the subject stands as I have been thinking about it. I'm not reading any articles or reporting information like that. These are all my own musings on the subject. They are just my opinion. So the first thing that I think is necessary to point out is that the fandom itself is potentially headed towards some dangerous territory. I will explain. So the Rings of Power was bad. We knew that it was going to be bad. We called it, we won, for lack of a better word, right? I mean, by won, what I really mean is that we all lost collectively, but we were right. There's no denying that at this point. But a trend that surfaced was to start calling anybody who said anything positive about Rings of Power or was excited for it or even just genuinely enjoyed it, to call those people shills. And in some cases, that's absolutely correct. Like, people actually were paid to be really excited for the show, and then they ended up not watching it for whatever reason, or saying that it was lore accurate and like trying to like mess around with words and definitions of what Tolkien actually meant, like a whole bunch of really insidious stuff. Not getting into the Rings of Power, it's not what this video is about. And we're setting ourselves up potentially here where there is going to be this societal expectation that you have to think a certain way about insert new media here. In this case, it is The Lord of the Rings, or you are a shill. For me, it's the exact opposite side of the coin of, if you don't like the new thing, it's because you're, you know, racist or sexist or whatever it is. The exact opposite side is, oh, if you like the current thing, then it's because you're a shill. We knew that the Rings of Power was going to be bad because of real world, objective, observable data, which was presented to us in the form of trailers, in the form of still footage, in the form of various press releases and interviews that were done with members of the writing and directing team and some members of the cast as well, and a mass media marketing campaign which targeted the Tolkien fan base and called us trolls, called us gatekeepers, called us, which gatekeeping is good, called us trolls, called us hateful, called us toxic, all sorts of names in an attempt to bully us and keep us quiet, essentially. And these were all red flags that we recognized. And it is that information combined with a previous pattern of that being done that led us to the correct conclusion that the Rings of Power was going to be the dumpster fire that it is. At the moment, we don't have enough of that data to say one way or another what Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema are going to do, what path they're going to take with these new Lord of the Rings films. So while if they go the same route as Amazon, we will push back against it as we did with the Rings of Power, as we rightfully should, it is not yet for me a foregone conclusion that that is what is going to happen. So I really think what we as a fandom need to do right now is take a step back, let our blood simmer a little bit, get the bad taste of Rings of Power out of our mouths, and react to this in a measured manner. To treat any new production as if it is guilty of the sins of a previous production is not justice, it's tribalism, which is something that I categorically reject whether or not it is in alignment with my personal viewpoints. We should not approach new Lord of the Rings adaptations with outright negativity unless there is an objective cause to do so. And we should not throw the word shill around without objective cause to do so. And I don't believe that the case that I'm going to make in this video, once I get to it, makes me a shill either, for the very simple reason that I don't and have never wanted the new Lord of the Rings adaptations to fail or be bad. I have always wanted them to be good. I'm gonna call them out if they're bad, and I'm not going to pretend that they were good if they weren't. But the simple matter is, if we get a good adaptation, then everybody wins. The fans win, the production company wins, the cast wins, everybody wins. If we get a bad one, everybody loses. So to illustrate what I think we need to avoid as a fandom, treating Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema as if they are definitely going to do the same thing that the Rings of Power did, or that they were responsible for it for some reason, I want to look at a couple characters from The Lord of the Rings. The first one that I present to you is Gollum. Gollum is an evil character. He is tricksy, he is false. Yet Frodo comes to the understanding that mercy and the chance at redemption is the wisest and technically the safest course of action. He is still firm. He's not going to be taken advantage of because of his naivety. He's not weak or anything like that. In fact, Tolkien is very specific about that being the case. He is, for the most part, kind to Gollum in the hopes that that will help Gollum choose the right path. And I have, of course, wondered, as I suppose many people have, if more people had treated Gollum with mercy and with kindness, if maybe Smeagol would have come out on top in the end instead. I just don't know. This is a recurring theme in The Lord of the Rings. Grima Wormtongue is shown grace as well, a chance at redemption when he is exiled from Theoden's court. He is a liar. He's a snake. He's responsible for almost single-handedly bringing down the downfall of the entire Rohan kingdom. His name is literally Wormtongue, but he is given the chance to prove himself as good, to make the right choice despite what most people know about him or what most people think that they know about him, even though everyone knows that he's going to go to Saruman probably. They still give him the chance to make that choice. Even Saruman himself is given this choice with Gandalf, right? He is asked to come down from the tower. Leave your tower, Saruman. Leave your schemes behind and come and help us. You have the chance to do great good. And the immensely important lesson that Tolkien teaches us is of grace and of free will. Each one of these characters had the opportunity to do good at many different intervals throughout the story. And yet, of their own accord, they chose to do evil, but they were, none of them, unjustly or prematurely punished for things that they might do or that they probably would do, because we as human beings do not have the power to know the ultimate final conclusion. We don't know the final answer. Do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment, right? So when the orcs come raiding and burning our villages, of course we're going to fight against them. And when the Dunlandings side with the orcs for some reason, because they've been manipulated by lies, of course we're going to fight against them. But when we win, and we will, we should also have the good grace to show them the all-important qualities of mercy and forgiveness. That is true strength. You cannot hurt me. Your staff is broken. I am prepared for your treachery. I anticipate it even. But if you choose good, I will do everything in my power to support you, because that is the right thing to do. And you should have the freedom to make that choice. And so should be the case with these new film adaptations. Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema are not Amazon. They had nothing to do with the Rings of Power. And I must stress that it is not the very simple line of logic that previous new modern media installments have been bad, therefore the Rings of Power is going to be bad, and it was, and therefore the new Warner Brothers Lord of the Rings movies will also be bad. It is that previous new modern media installments have done these very specific things. They have attacked the fans, they have openly disregarded and subverted source material, they have shown themselves to be openly hostile and to have contempt for the entire concept of fandoms and the IPs that they are fans of. And they have used buzzwords like update, modern audience, toxic fandom, and Amazon has demonstrably done all of these things, and therefore the Rings of Power is going to be bad. So until, and only if, Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema do these things with these specific movies, then and only then can we say with confidence what the end result is going to be. Until then, I think that there is actually a very strong case to be made for cautious, not blind, cautious optimism and excitement, and even support. Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema actually have something great going for them in contrast to Gollum and Wormtongue and Saruman, and that is that they actually haven't committed any evil acts in regards to Lord of the Rings. In fact, they actually have a pretty decent track record. New Line Cinema is what brought us the original Peter Jackson trilogy, and Warner Brothers is what took over, and that is how we got the Hobbit trilogy. For better or for worse, it was not the Rings of Power. And now working together, Warner Brothers, New Line Cinema should have all of the necessary resources and assets to pull from the original trilogy and the Hobbit films to use in these new films so it feels cohesive. I have also seen that Peter Jackson, Fran Walsh, and Philippa Boyens are in contact with the producing companies and may be open to being involved. I'm not sure to what capacity yet. I'm sure they're still hashing that out. And there is also, finally, a very strong societal incentive, and a money incentive as well, for them to absolutely come through and give us a good Lord of the Rings adaptation. We are that incentive. You and me, us, the fandom, we have done this. The Lord of the Rings fandom, the Tolkien fandom, has successfully demonstrated that we have power as the consumers of this media, that we know good from bad, and that we will not settle for anything less than respectful adaptations, and that we are willing to speak and fight against hostile and subversive adaptations, adaptations that treat the source material disrespectfully, adaptations that treat the fandom disrespectfully. But we have also demonstrated that we know what good adaptations are like, that they are achievable, right? We're not asking for anything impossible. The Peter Jackson original trilogy already exists, and that there is a hunger for good stories to be told with passion and love for the original source material and the story above all else, in a fan base large enough to support that media without the need to market towards a larger consumer base. I mean, try to bring them in, sure. Bring new people to the fandom so that everyone can love the movies and love the books, great. But not to market in a modern adaptation. And in a way, ironically, the Rings of Power actually helped us to prove that. The Rings of Power successfully proved that there is a huge hole in the market that the right production team has yet to fill, since essentially the last 5 seasons of Game of Thrones, or rather the first 5 seasons, or maybe even the original Lord of the Rings films themselves. And new, good Lord of the Rings films, good adaptations from Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema would be not a reboot, if they do it correctly, would be not a reboot of the original films, but rather a reboot of Hollywood. Because if these movies are good, as they have every potential to be, and they blow it up at the box office, which we as the fans will make sure of if they do it right, there will be a concrete answer to the very vague sort of corporate think tank question of, well, what did the people really want? Who should we be marketing to? And that answer will be so loud that future production companies that are planning to make adaptations would have to be deaf in order to ignore it. The proper formula to please a fan base of an established and well-beloved IP is very simply to treat that IP with the utmost respect, to approach it from a place of love and deep knowledge of the source material, and very simply, just don't attack the fans. It really isn't that hard. If you do this, you will win the loyalty and support of the fan base, and we will hand you success and love and accolades on a silver platter if you do. At the very least, Warner Brothers has the fantastic business incentive to go, Amazon, you had your chance. You screwed it up. This is how you do The Lord of the Rings. Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema are perfectly positioned to smash through that barrier of negativity that previous reboots and flops have created. There are so many examples of how to do it wrong at this point, Star Wars being a huge one. There is pretty much no excuse for doing it wrong at this point. Good films that focus on the story and put Tolkien's story and Tolkien's true themes and his true messages into the films above all else will solidify Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema as the absolute titans of Lord of the Rings adaptations and fantasy films in general. They have everything going for them. They've done it before, and they have every reason to do it again. So don't give them a reason to do it wrong. If we approach this with hostility, without cause, we are telling them that they have to make something which will cater to a modern audience, a new audience, and not us. Because if they feel that they're never going to please us, they're not even going to try. Negativity is going to breed more negativity. And it also puts us in the very awkward and difficult position of proving the hostile media that was shilling for the Rings of Power correct. What did they say about us? They said that anyone who complained about the Rings of Power was just being toxic. Haters are just gonna hate. We're a small group of trolls. And in the case of content creators, that we were just trying to get hate clicks in order to make money or something like that. Just don't play into that at all. If it's bad, we call it out. If it's not bad, there's no reason to get into a fight about it yet. Fight when you must. Yes, but know when to draw your sword and when to use diplomacy. Positivity and goodwill may yet yield something beautiful. There is always hope. And we even have some examples of modern media getting put forth that completely surprised, I don't know, me at least, in proving that there is still room for movies, especially in the medieval fantasy sort of legendary genre, that put the story above all else and just tell a good story very, very well. And that was The Northman. It can be done. So what does The Lord of the Rings teach us about this is that every character who gave into despair, who went total doomer mode and took the black pill, those characters were wrong. And I know it's hard not to go doomer mode. And trust me, there are many reasons too, but it is antithetical to the very concept of The Lord of the Rings. Because if they had given in to despair, they never would have succeeded at destroying the ring. Like Sauron would have just won. Giving in to despair, that is exactly what they want. Don't give in. The entire plot is filled with characters that just go, there is no chance we are succeeding, but man, are we gonna do it anyway. And they just have faith. That is the energy that we need to be channeling right now. Are and Toluva, they will come again. Denethor looked into the black ships and he saw his despair in the Palantir and that he gave into it, not knowing that those ships actually carried the actual return of the king, and that because he gave into despair, he died and gave into madness, and he ended up not living to see the blooming of the white tree. I am actually genuinely very excited by the possibilities of what Warner Brothers and New Line could achieve here. It is well within their reach to do so. Peter Jackson shouldn't direct the new Lord of the Rings films if he doesn't want to. It would be great if he did, but he may just not have the passion or the time or the drive to direct more Lord of the Rings films, and that's fine. I love his films, but if he doesn't want to be involved, no one should force him to be involved. But if Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens were to write the script, or have at least a heavy consultation or a heavy influence in how that script is done, how the designs are done, stuff like that, they should be using Weta, of course, and then they actually bring on Tom Shippey, and then they don't fire him for an arbitrary reason, and they actually keep him, and they listen to him. And then what if they ask Andy Serkis to direct the films? Even if Andy Serkis says no, it would still go a long way to increasing my faith in the intentions of the production team personally if they did ask Andy Serkis. But Andy has a lot of credentials that make him very attractive for that position of directing these new films. He was second unit director for the Hobbit films. He of course, played Gollum. He knows his way around a set, and he knows how to communicate with actors as well. He has done numerous audiobooks for The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, The Silmarillion. He knows those books inside and out. Give Jed Brophy a huge role in these new films so that he can continue his character arc of going on to playing bigger and better characters in anything that is a Lord of the Rings adaptation. I know that he was an orc in The Rings of Power, but let's be honest, that is a step down from when he played Nori. He needs to go up somewhere. Jed Brophy is king. And finally, Warner Brothers should release a professional statement And by professional, I mean that they're not going to be stepping on other people's toes in the industry or ticking anybody off, because of course you don't want to do that. It's diplomacy. You're not picking fights if you don't have to. But they should release a statement that recent adaptations have fallen short of fan expectations and caused fruitless negativity, and they understand that. And that they are going to do everything in their power to deliver a beautiful and respectful Tolkien adaptation, and then list the steps that they are taking towards that end, and then furthermore deliver on those promises. And if they do that, Warner Brothers New Line Cinema, you will have a smashing success. We will make sure of it. The fandom will rally to support you if you pull this off. There are so many stories that I would love to see adapted to screen. The Children of Hurin, the War of Wrath, the actual forging of the Silmarils, the War of the North in Dale, which was happening at the same time that the War for the Ring was happening in Gondor and Rohan. Young Aragorn could be explored. So many fantastic options. The only thing that I hope nobody ever touches, ever, is the story of Beren and Luthien. That should remain canonized and sacred in the books on the page alone. My friends, we are now fighting for something, rather than just simply against something, that one thing having been the Rings of Power. But fighting for something is exponentially more powerful, and it's much more difficult. Let this be the hour when we draw swords together. Fans, the producers, the future cast, everyone as one. Because if they do it right, the future cast and the producers, everyone involved will be fans too. And it is to this end, this perhaps fanciful dream, that I implore you not to give in to despair. That would be the true loss. I know it's hard. We've been burned a lot of times, and there never was much hope, just a fool's hope. But it's much easier to say that you dislike something, or that you're against something, or that you at least have apathy towards it, than it is to really allow yourself to hope, knowing full well that you might get betrayed. If we really want to turn the ship around, if we really want to make a difference, we have to believe that day will come again. This is the next step. If not now, then sometime in the future. But the time will come, and this is the way forward, and we must always find the heart to rally. The eucatastrophe, a word invented by Tolkien, meaning a sudden and favorable outcome in the face of great adversary, is one of the most powerful themes, and it takes incredible strength of spirit to lose and lose and lose, but still find hope that the Rohirrim is going to crest over that ridge and charge towards Pelennor Fields and our salvation, to say not that it is over or die in vain glory, but to live and allow yourself to be hurt and feel and say, "For Frodo," before charging forth. That is the true battle, and it happens in here. Pardon me for getting sappy for a second, but let's do everything we can to encourage Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema and be supportive of them. Let's make a showing of good faith and love that this beautiful fandom is capable of showing, and encourage them to make this the best that it has the potential to be. They've already done it once, and I believe that they can do it again if they want to.